Hi, my name is Jen Ellison, and this is my research project. And this is a project, for this research project, I was taking a look at computer coding in the classroom and its impact on students who study computer programming. So I started out from the place of kind of looking at current educational trends. I was looking at the growth in the areas of STEAM or STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and how it seems to be a fairly popular trend currently. A lot of schools are including STEAM education. And I was also looking at things like Hour of Code, which is a worldwide event to promote coding, computer coding education. And it started out really small, and it's grown over the last few years. And then I also was looking at, for example, in the Common Core Standards for California, this focus or emphasis on measuring, studying, and understanding and developing students' critical thinking skills. So I was kind of looking at all of those things, and it sort of led me to my research question, which was what effects does coding instruction, and we look specifically at HTML, CSS instruction, have on 5th grade students' critical thinking skills. In other words, since we're devoting all this time, thought, and energy into making sure that students today learn some computer skills, even computer coding skills or computer programming skills, what impact does that have on their overall ability to think critically? So I looked at, here's an example. This is code.org's website, and this is their Hour of Code page. And there are numerous activities for students to do. It also says on their web page that 10% of all the students in the world participate in Hour of Code, which when you think about that, that's a lot of people. So it's a tremendously big event. And you can also take a look at this website. Coding or programming is not something just for adults. Obviously, this is intended for children. And they even have activities for children who are pre-readers, who don't know how to read yet. So there's this push to introduce the concept of computer programming or coding to students at a young age. And then if you go to places like Khan Academy, there's an entire section on computers and computer programming. Khan Academy, their basic mission, operating mission, is to provide a world-class education for everyone. And they obviously have included computer programming as part of that, what they call a world-class education. And so there are all these lessons on learning how to program a computer, learning how to animate, and also they start with very young ages. So there's this emphasis for young people to be exposed to code, which is, what led me to this question, which is what's the impact of learning those things. So my methods, I used a convenience sample, which was a class that I teach. It's a group of 23 fifth graders, and I administered a pretest to them and also a survey. And then I exposed them to, we worked together on some HTML, CSS lessons within Khan Academy, actually. And then we went back and I gave them the same test as the pretest, as a post-test, and another survey. So let me show you some of those things. So here's a sample of the survey. This is actually the post-test survey, but the pretest was really similar. So my students filled this out, and the pretest mainly looked at, or the pretest survey mainly looked at what kind of exposure they had to computers even before the lesson. So this is the survey that I gave them pretest. Actually, this is the post-test one, but the pretest one was really similar. And basically, they told me their 6-digit number and their age. They gave me their 6-digit number for all of their work, so that it was anonymous. Anyway, so I was just looking at what they had been exposed to before we did any lessons. And I was also looking at what technology they had access to. So there were questions on it about whether or not they had computers in their home, whether they had internet connection, what they used the computers for, things like that. So that was the survey. And then this is the pretest right here. And it was a simple, well, a 2-step word math problem that they had to solve. I wanted to provide them with something that was grade level appropriate, so this was taken from Common Core curriculum, 5th grade, and I noted their age. They wrote down their gender, and their age at the time they took the test, because I had a student who was turning, actually I think she just had her birthday this week. Anyway, she really wanted to put her new age down, but I told her she had to put her actual age. And then we noted the time they started the pretest and the time that they finished it, because I wanted to see how much time they spent on it too, as part of my study. So, and they were just these word problems in which they would have to determine not only an answer, but how to get to the answer. So, for example, in this one, they not only had to figure out, the goal was to figure out how much each person paid for a slice of pizza, but they had to figure out what number to use. So, for example, it's Tanya and her 4 friends, so you needed to divide this number by 5 in order to get the answer. Or, for example, this one, you're given the cost per pound for the jelly beans, which is right here, and then you had to multiply it by this. So not only did they have to have computational skills, they had to know how to multiply these two numbers, but they also had, there was an element of it where they had to think critically to determine how to solve the problem. So, so this was the pre-test. It was also the post-test. I just gave them the exact same test. So they took that, and then we spent about a week at Khan Academy working our way through these introduction to HTML, CSS lessons where they had to make a web page. And there are a total of 71 lessons. We covered together within a week. We covered about, I think 15 of them all together, and we did that for an hour at a time. And some of the lessons, when I say 15 lessons, like lesson number 1 is just a paragraph about what HTML and CSS is, and then lesson 2 is video instruction, and lesson 3 you actually do some work. So that's why we're able to cover so many lessons in a week. So yeah, so here's an example. And then, so there was a lot of information for them to learn, which we worked on together, and then they would have an activity that they had to actually use that information critically, think critically about how to create the web page. So here's an example where they had to create a poem using coding. This is one of the assignments that they did with computer programming. So they worked their way through those lessons. I had 2 students who really enjoyed the lessons and actually are still working through those 71 lessons. One of them has actually finished all 71 of the introduction to HTML and CSS, and they've now moved on to advanced HTML, CSS, which is, instead of just making a basic web page, is learning how to include animation. And so, you know, some of my students went on and outside of the lessons began to sort of create things, just a free creation, which you can also do in Khan Academy. So they had a little bit of extra exposure because on their own time or during free time in other classes when they had access to computers, they did more work without my instruction, just self-instruction. So, for example, one of them's working on these lessons now. So my results for the pretest were that of my 23 students, the average score was 1 correct out of 4, and the average time spent on the test was 4 minutes. So after we spent the week studying HTML, CSS, I had them take that same test again, and the average score on the post-test was 1.57 correct out of 4. But the interesting thing was that the elapsed time on the test nearly doubled. In some cases, it did double. So students were spending more time on the students spent more time on the post-test than they did on the pre-test. And you can see here, these are the scores that were earned. Some of them, it was exactly the same pre-test to post-test. Light blue is pre-test, dark blue is post-test. And you can see here on the pre-test, the average score was 1.2 out of 4. On the post-test, 1.74. And then here, the average time, actually, on the pre-test was 7.2 minutes, and the post-test time was 10.3, 10 minutes, 37 seconds. But if you can see here on the chart too, again, the light blue is the pre-test, then the dark blue is the post-test. So overall, more time was spent on the post-test. And as a result, when I entered the information into the T-chart, the results were statistically significant. Actually, it said statistically very significant. And I found that to be pretty interesting because I, had no expectations for results one way or the other. And I just found the whole thing very interesting. Especially because of the difference in time spent on it, really surprised me. And so obviously there's the implications are that it is based on this very small, very short study that there appears to be some link between exposure to computer programming and critical thinking skills. But the biggest, I think, implication is that more study is needed. One of my frustrations during the entire process was the lack of studies that look at the link between teaching computer programming or some computer skills and logic and critical thinking. And since that's something that is sort of moving forward as an educational trend, it seems that we should be looking at how that impacts the classroom. So the overall implications are that there is cause to study this further, to look into it some more. I had some limitations. I teach at a school that does not have a diverse population, so my students that participated in the study represented that. Of the 23 students, most of them self-identify as Latino, so we were looking at a specific population, not a diverse one. They also, 85% of the students who attend our school are free reduced lunch. They're considered to be living in poverty. That's also true of the students that participated in this study. And obviously, the implications of poverty are far-reaching, and the lack of exposure to technology outside of school may or may not have had a significant effect on that. I don't know, because I, like I said, did not have a diverse population. Be interesting to see what the study would look like if we conducted it in a more diverse pool that included students who had been exposed to the use of computers from the time when they were very young, and also had the ability to use those computers outside of school. I think that would be interesting to see. I'd also personally be really interested to see the study take place over a longer period of time. I have been teaching computers here at our school for 3 years, and I teach the entire school computers, and so I would be really interested to see what would be the impact of that education starting in 2nd grade, working with computers all the way up through 6th grade when they graduate from our school. What impact that has on their critical thinking, not just in math, which is what I was specifically looking at this time, but also across the board, reading, STEM classes, art, even physical fitness, just to take a look at what those students experience. So that is a basic overview of my research project. If you have any questions, you can email me or let me know. That's my Twitter handler. You can find me on Twitter. Thank you.